Okay, welcome everybody. I have a handout just to make it easier to follow along, and it's got two sides if you want to hand that out. And if you need a pen, these I stole off of the card coloring table, and these I stole from the office. So if you have one with a black X, it goes back to the office. The others go back to Anne. So I'd like to read a verse from Psalm 95. He is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the sheep of his hand, or NIV says the flock under his care. And I was assigned a topic about Jesus as the good shepherd, comfort of still waters. And I want to talk about trusting Jesus as our good shepherd, and also the fact that life has a lot of seasons and stages, and the truth is that often before you get to the still waters, he leads you through the wilderness. So let me tell you what my Monday morning was like this week. So my husband and I have been sleeping upstairs for the last 5 months because my mother-in-law moved in with us in April. So we gave her half of our downstairs, our bedroom and office and bathroom were hers. And the upstairs is much hotter than the downstairs. So I woke up at 3 o'clock and the bedroom was hot and stuffy. So I took a pillow and went downstairs and tried to sleep on the couch. And at 6 o'clock, stuff started stirring at our house. And Sunday had been really busy. We had guests over. And I was lying there on the couch and I thought, okay, would it be so much to ask to just let me slowly ease into my week, sort of quietly and gently? That did not seem like too much to ask. But as we see, pretty soon, our daughter Emily came through because she had an early Zoom meeting, and then my husband came in the kitchen, and he was, he's not naturally a quiet person, and he was slamming and banging, and pretty soon he's asking me questions because our son was coming to take him hiking I forget which mountain they hiked, and he had to pack a lunch, and he couldn't find the hard-boiled eggs, and he couldn't find the lunch meat, and he couldn't find the bottled water. So I got up and I found everything for him, and I made coffee. I tried to wake up, and at 8 o'clock, a plumber came. Nice guy, but he needed me to get shoes on and go outside and show him where to put the outside faucets. And then I was alone in the kitchen for a little bit, and I thought, there's some really good apple pie left from Sunday dinner, and I think I will eat that for breakfast, or eat a piece for breakfast. And I had just gotten it ready, and then my mother-in-law came into the kitchen, and she's 91, and she's pretty traditional, and I felt so guilty eating apple pie for breakfast in front of my mother-in-law that I just put it aside and did not eat apple pie. And then the day went on, and my mother-in-law actually moved out to a daughter's house on Thursday. She's been kind of going from child to child. So another daughter came, and we were hauling these big bins of grandma's stuff. And of course, in the morning, our son Ben came, and he and Paul packed up and went to go hiking. And one of our son's old friend came, Trenton Ruckert, he came by, and we talked. And then I had to make supper, and then I was really tired, but we had 2 nieces that stopped in to get some eggs, and we sat and chatted with them for a while. So there was no easing into the week for me. And when that happens to me, my mind goes on this very dangerous little track. I need some peace and quiet really bad. This is more than a want. This is a need. Okay? I'm convinced of that. And then I ask for it and it doesn't happen. And so the messages that come in my mind are, God doesn't really know, or he doesn't really care, he doesn't really love me. And then it snowballs. Like, can I really trust him with just the ordinary daily stuff? Many times in Scripture, God is portrayed as a shepherd. So what does that mean to have him be the shepherd? Well, he's in charge. We're the sheep. He leads us. He cares about us. And he always has our good in mind. That's the solid truth of God being the shepherd. He also has no obligation to inform us why he's doing what he's doing. In Exodus, God is leading his people like a shepherd, the Bible says that, out of Egypt into the promised land. So the promised land is going to be milk and honey, lots of water, fertile fields, all of that, but they're not there yet. And first they're going through the wilderness. And if you've been in the Middle East, that is serious wilderness. I mean, it is desert, it is dry, hard to get water, all of that. And when we're following Jesus, there are seasons and there are different stages of our journey. And so the title is about green pastures and still waters, but I decided to deviate from that and talk about the wilderness. Because I think many of you here are more at that stage. And before I really go into that, I also want to read a verse from Isaiah 40. I think it's on your papers. He shall feed his flock like a shepherd. He shall gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom, and shall gently lead those that are with young. And I'm just going to do a bit of a rabbit trail here. And that is to emphasize that even when things are hard, God is a gentle shepherd, and he is especially gentle with those that have young, the caregivers, the mothers. There is grace for us, and he carries us gently. He carries the lambs. He leads us gently. And I think I found when I was a young mom that I had an extra sensitivity to God and to the world's needs, and I somehow wanted to fix and solve everything. Like, we were living up in Canada on a reservation, and there were so many needs, and I wanted to meet all the needs and feed all the hungry children and have everybody at my house for tea and listen to all the stories and share the gospel and on and on. And it was easy for me to resent my children and the responsibilities, because, like, why would God let me see all these needs out there and then not give me the time and the resources? But I just want to say that, yeah, there is grace for you, and and this also goes for caring for elderly parents, or if you have a special needs family member. Think of Jesus as your shepherd giving you special grace. And I know as a young mom, you also get pressure to teach your child to read when they're 4 years old, and make the yogurt and sew the cloth diapers and all the things. And the shepherd will give you grace if you need to buy the yogurt and get disposable diapers. That's okay. So, and I feel like there are seasons, I think maybe especially single women are often called to the really challenging, cutting edge ministries. We have a daughter in Thailand who lives way out in a little town, and she rides her motorbike around on those terrible roads and teaches high school English. But that's not something that I could have done when I was her age with small children. So there are seasons and there are callings. So let's think about the wilderness. So you know the story about Moses leading the people out of Egypt. And so they're in Egypt, they have leeks and garlics to eat, but they're also slaves. And then they come to the Red Sea, God parts the Red Sea, and then off they go through the desert. So what was it like there? Any words for what the desert was like for the children of Israel? Dry, harsh, parched. Boring. Endless.
Complete dependence on God for simple sustenance.
Yes, complete dependence on God for simple sustenance. There was lots of waiting. There were enemies to fight. Lots of not knowing what to do and not knowing what God was up to. And there was lots of second guessing. We should have stayed in Egypt. What were we thinking? And there were lots of reminders to trust God, and there were consequences if they didn't. There were also glimpses of God's presence. There was water from the rock. There was manna every day, pillar of fire. And even with those signs, they found it hard to trust God. So it seems to me that the biggest temptation, maybe this is just me, so I'm talking out of my experience, but the biggest temptation in the wilderness is to stop trusting. Eve was not in the wilderness. She was in a beautiful garden with everything she could want. But she had one temptation, and that was to eat the fruit, and it came out of doubt. Because she wanted this, and it did not make sense that God would deny it to her. So the big question for Eve was, can I trust God? Can I take his word for this? Does he love me? And that's the temptation that I face today, and probably you do too. And my theory is that each of us has a couple of little things that are honestly pretty little, but those are the things we trip on. For me, especially one of them, the things that trip me up seem very silly on the surface. And for me, it's not the big things. So 4 years ago, my husband was this busy pastor, business owner, school teacher, and he had a very bad fall. He almost died. He shattered both of his wrists very badly. He broke his skull. His head was split open. He broke 5 vertebrae in his back. He broke a bunch of ribs. Barely survived, but he recovered with paralysis in his left arm. That was a truly horrible experience, and it totally changed our lives. But in that whole thing, I did not question God or his love for me. It was a special measure of grace, I think. So I found that it's not the big things that trip me up. So I have 2 things I'll list, and I just bear with me here because this is kind of embarrassing. One of them is, like I was talking about my Monday morning and wanting things to come at me a little bit slower. And along with that is I've always had ADHD and just this very scattered brain that's just sort of this fire hose of creative ideas in there, and I can't remember things, and I'm not a good, practical, hardworking Mennonite lady by nature, okay? And then along came menopause and made it far worse, and my husband's accident made it worse. And I will say also, if you've had a catastrophic event in your life, please be kind to yourself because it really does something to your brain. Often you can't handle noise, you can't handle crowds, and little things overwhelm you. So we've been seeing a counselor, and he said I should use emotional word pictures to tell my husband how I feel. Okay, so my husband was an ACE school teacher for many years. So I told him, okay, think of my brain as a classroom, excuse me, And I'm the teacher and I'm trying to keep order, but children are milling around and they're talking and there's spit wads flying and somebody's bouncing a soccer ball against the wall and it's just pretty chaotic. That's on a good day. On a bad day, the windows are broken and there's a hurricane blowing through and somebody has a gun and there's bullets ricocheting and maybe a SWAT team moving in. So the light dawned on his face. It was like he understood now. So I said, there are some things that sort of calm down that classroom in my head. One is sewing, going on a walk, talking with a friend, reading, that kind of thing. That sort of calms the chaos. And there are two things that completely calm it down, just settles it. Unfortunately, one of them is just scrolling on my phone on social media. And that's the temptation, and I feel like the industry has exploited people like me to make your brain, I don't know, I feel like I was targeted somehow, that, because obviously it is not good for me in the long term to scroll on my phone, but the temptation is that it calms down the chaos. And the other thing that calms it down is time alone at home. It helps to go on a walk by myself, but to be in my kitchen, just poking and rattling around and organizing my spices and baking a cake and stuff, but with nobody interrupting me and nobody crashing in the back door, coming in the front door and talking to me, okay? Oh, and I also told Paul that if I'm in the middle of figuring out something like my to-do list or a grocery list or something, and he comes in the back door and starts talking to me, I said, there is an explosion under the desk where the answer keys are, and all those notebooks go flying, and we have to gather up all those papers and start over. So, for some reason, having time alone at home is something that God has not granted me. We have had adult children at home for years. We took care of my dad for 4 summers. We have had my mother-in-law there for 5 months. And I cannot tell you how many times over the years I thought, oh my goodness, he's going to go to work and then I will have a little bit of time alone. And literally the second that the last person went out the back door, somebody came in the front door. So somehow God has chosen this as my suffering. I think it's suffering. And so the temptation is, okay, so I have asked God if he could change this and just, give me some more time alone at home for my mental health. But he has not given it to me, and so the temptation is to go from that to, he doesn't love me, he can't be trusted. So I am guessing that is not what trips you up, but I'd like you to think about what are the little things that make you go there? Because they're all lies, and I just feel like Satan waits. He knows your weakness, and he tries to put those lies in your head. The second thing where I have trouble trusting God is with my children getting married and having babies. So we have 6 adult children from 38 down to 25. Our oldest one is married to a wonderful lady named Phoebe. And so far, God has not sent them children. And my daughters are 36, 34, and 25. They're single, and we have sons 29 and 31. And I have prayed a lot, and I have fasted, and I have hinted and suggested. And those nice young men that come to sing for Gospel Echoes, I have had them in our home. When my daughter's friends come to visit, I make sure that the sons organize a hiking trip for everybody. I have had little conversations with other moms with single children. And there's been some romantic drama and so on, and a bunch of disappointments, but mostly nothing. It is hard to trust God with that But the truth is that he has things well in hand and he loves us. I don't know if grandchildren are in our future or not, but as an act of faith, these are my faith seeds. I collect these little animals like grandmas carry in their purses. And I got these. Is Kendra here today? Kendra Shones, is she here today? Anyway, she had a garage sale and she was selling these. We stopped by there this morning. So, those remind me that God has not forgotten us. So, those are like my mental health, my children's future. That feels like the wilderness to me. And we've also been in a stage of transition with church. Paul was a pastor at Brownsville for 25 years and had to quit because of his accident. And so we have been in a hard season, just feeling like that is not really working for us anymore, to be there and not sure what we're supposed to do. So it's like we're 18 trying to figure out what to do with our lives, but it's kind of scary. So some of you are going through the wilderness right now. You're not sure if God is leading or where he is leading. It feels confusing, it feels hard, it feels parched and boring, and you're waiting. And I just want to share a few things that I have learned to do or to remember in the wilderness. One is to hang on to the truth, because the lies of God not being trustworthy, they are just right there waiting, and you just cannot let yourself entertain them. And so the truth is, he loves me, he cares about me, he cares about my children, he has things well in hand, he is leading us, and he has not forgotten us, and I can trust him. And this will not last forever. The second thing is to remember what he's done in the past. And if you read the story about the children of Israel and their journey, so many times the message for them was, don't forget. Like, give yourself reminders, build altars, all these things so you don't forget. And as far as my son and daughter-in-law are a good reminder that God has things in hand. So our son Matt was working in Washington, D.C., and I was writing a newspaper column at the time in Eugene, for the Eugene newspaper, and I wrote something in there about him working in Washington, D.C., and he was home for a visit, and this is what we talked about, and whatever. And then I got an email from my friend Tom. Tom worked for the same newspaper. He was a graphic designer, and I had actually hired him to do the covers of 2 of my books. So every month he would do the design for my column in the newspaper, and I had done 2 of my book covers. So Tom emailed me and he said, I noticed in your column that you have a son in D.C. Do you realize I have a daughter in Washington, D.C.? Do you think they would like to meet? I said, well, I know Matt was always eager to meet Oregon people when he was back there, so sure. And I promise I was not matchmaking because I did not know this girl. Okay, so we did the information, phone numbers and everything, and they met for coffee. Talked about Oregon. She grew up 10 miles from us. And so Matt just, sent a text that they met. It was fine, whatever. It turned out later that her friends were getting an awful lot more details than we were, but then they met again, and the third time they met, they went to the Air and Space Museum for 3 hours. And our son Ben said, okay, that's it. This is a green light or something, because any girl that can listen to our son at the Air and Space Museum for 3 hours, she's a keeper. So they ended up getting married. And somewhere in that process, I found out that, so one of my books is Footprints on the Ceiling, and there's a footprint on the cover. And Tom, Phoebe's dad, had done that cover for me, And so I found out that he told his daughters that he needs a volunteer to paint their foot and make a footprint, and because he's designing this book cover for Dorcas Smucker. And so Phoebe volunteered to do it, and she said she has a picture of herself in pajamas with her foot painted, laughing hysterically, making a footprint on a paper on the floor, and then that became the book cover. And so for all those, 5 years, I was selling this book. That was my future daughter-in-law's footprint on the cover, and I never knew. So, so the third thing to do is to obey. Often in the wilderness, there is so little direction, and you don't know where to go or what to do, but if there is a glimmer of light, you follow it. And if there is something that you know you should do, you do it, because that leads to more direction, more steps to take. So my husband's family has been through quite a process trying to figure out where his mom should live. It didn't seem right to put her in assisted living somewhere. That wasn't working, and so we decided to rotate her among her children for a while. So it made sense. It seemed to make sense for her to come live at our house, and in some ways it absolutely did not make sense because it was a lot of upheaval and my mental health wasn't very good and so on. But I somehow in my heart knew we should do this. So we went through the process. We moved our things upstairs and did a lot of shuffling around, and she moved in April. And she and I have not always had an easy relationship. She's very traditional, and she's very, in the past, she has been very honest about my housekeeping and so on. So I didn't know how that would go. Well, honestly, we had 5 months of mercy and grace. And God had all these little surprises for me. Just for instance, I find it hard to have a routine, a daily routine, even though it's good for me. Well, having her there just made it easier, much easier, to have a daily routine. So that was just one little mercy of many. And before she left, she just really affirmed me as a caregiver, and that really meant a lot to me. Because there's been other areas where she did not connect with me or did not affirm me, and she really appreciated me as a caregiver. So as I said, we moved her to her daughter Rosie's house on Thursday, and that season is over. And I'm just very glad that I said yes. The fourth thing is to ask. Excuse me. To ask and seek and knock. And sometimes it's easy for us to be passive. Like we feel stuck, we don't know which way to go, we don't know what to do, but I feel like God appreciates momentum and doing something rather than doing nothing. And sometimes we kind of sit back like, oh, well, this is really a horrible situation, but God knows best, and I'll just have to trust. But it's surprising to me how often we are told to ask for what we need. And so, so in the New Testament, you look at the stories about Jesus healing, and often, or a number of times, he makes people ask. So you have a blind man, and Jesus says, "What do you want me to do for you?" And I think, it was obvious what he needed, But Jesus made him ask. And there's other situations. There was a woman that he healed where he wanted her to ask before he healed. So I take that as his blessing on asking for what we need, and it does something to you when you put it into words. There's something powerful about that. Ask and it shall be given you, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door shall be opened unto you. And in the book of James, ye have not because ye ask not. So I find it very hard to ask, especially ask for help, ask for what I need. And the last couple of years, I feel like I hear Jesus' voice in my head saying, ask for what you want. What do you want me to do for you? And I also have to ask my people. And I found it extremely hard to tell my beloved family that I need time alone, because I was afraid I would hurt them deeply. And the truth was, they're concerned about my mental health, and they did not take it personally. And so we were working out a schedule for me to have a couple hours in the morning in the kitchen by myself. It is hard, it's risky to ask, because if the answer is no, you really have to grapple with the questions of whether or not God cares. But he still wants us to ask, and he wants us to trust him with the decision he makes. Fifth thing I have here is to have others tell you the truth. It would be very dangerous for you to, in this kind of weather, to go backpacking all by yourself, especially if you decided to backpack across Eastern Oregon. Okay? Much safer if you take somebody with you, and you can together make sure you have all the water you need, and they can watch out if you're getting a heat stroke, and you can watch out for them, and so on. And I feel like in the wilderness, especially if you're in a season maybe between churches, or you're in a mission setting away from family, that it's easy to be isolated. And you really need your people around you who can say, no, you're going to be okay. You've got to trust God. He is trustworthy. He has your good in mind. This will not last forever. There's a purpose in this. So you need somebody to remind you of the truth. And then number 6, I have to look for manna. Psalm 86:17, give me a sign of your goodness that my enemies may see it and be put to shame, for you, Lord, have helped me and comforted me. And it's okay to ask for signs of God's presence, because sometimes we lose sight. It just feels like there's a lot of silence, and we just need these little glimmers. All the big things in your life might be unresolved, but you just need a little sign that he's not forgotten you. So this week, like I said, it started out difficult, and there were just lots of demands. And then I was getting ready for this weekend, and I have a pair of prescription sunglasses, and I couldn't find them. And I thought, I'm going to need my sunglasses. So I prayed about it. And I felt like, I don't usually hear God's voice quite this clearly, but I just sensed him saying that I should look in my pink purse that I had taken to church on Sunday. And I told him, I went clear through that purse. I know I did. And the sense, whatever, did not go away, so okay, fine. So I went in my closet. But first I looked in my black purse, because I thought that was more logical. And I felt like the Lord was saying, no, wrong purse. And so I looked in my pink purse that I had gone through before, and my Bible was lying in the bottom, and I picked it up, and there were my sunglasses. That was a really wonderful little fun gift from God to show that he's not forgotten me. And humor. You need humor in the wilderness. It's just such a life-giving thing. And I mentioned that I was going to eat apple pie for breakfast on Monday, and I felt guilty doing that in front of my mother-in-law, so I had something else instead. And Tuesday morning, I came down to the kitchen, and my mother-in-law was standing there in her housecoat, eating a piece of apple pie for breakfast. And there are many things that I did not list here that we could have for what to do in the wilderness. And the one thing that I just thought of a little bit ago was to stay hydrated. And certainly if a day like today, if you're backpacking, it is crucial that you have a lot of water with you. And when you're in the wilderness, even, especially, caregiving, I think, is one of the most challenging things for having time with the Lord. But you can be flexible. There are other ways to get God's word and to pray than being all alone with the door shut for half an hour, but just find ways to hydrate and feed on God's word.